Hey, buying a house with zero down is kind of tricky because there's ways to do it, but you got to kind of navigate it just right. We're going to use an example of a $100,000 house just because the number's round and it's easy. Okay, USDA will allow you to buy a house if it's in a rural area for zero down, and they'll even allow you to finance the closing costs. But it's tricky about how you get it done. So I want to give you six, seven different ways to handle the closing costs on a USDA loan. The first way is you get the seller to pay up to 6% of the purchase price towards the closing costs. So the seller has the house advertised for $100,000 down. For $100,000. You make an offer for $100,000 and you ask them to pay the closing costs up to 6%. They can if they will. Now the seller might say, nah, in this market, I'm taking $100,000, nothing less. Then you can offer them the option of you pay them $106,000 for the house and they give you back $6,000 in closing costs. That would be a seller loan. The loan pays the seller. So now the loan is $106,000 and they're taking $6,000 out of that loan to pay for the closing costs. The seller's still getting their $100,000. So you say, Josh, those two options sound very much the same. They are very much the same, but they're different. And I think they should be presented as two options. I would say to the seller, would you take $100,000 for the house? If they say yes, you say, great. Will you pay $6,000 towards the closing costs? And they say, no, we want $100,000. You say, okay, great. That's fair enough. We'll get you $100,000. Let's do $106,000 purchase price with you giving us back $6,000 in closing. Therefore, you get your $100,000 and we purchase your house, and it works out. And so that is lender pay. Loan pays, but the seller still gets their $100,000. So it's two different ways, essentially, that are the same, but it's two different ways to look at the same thing. And I think the way you negotiate that is important. It's important to find a price that the seller will agree to, like $100,000, and then you use that 600,000. That 600, that $6,000, and move it up and down on the loan amount. Maybe they'll split it with you and say, okay, how about 103,000? You pay 6,000 in closing, and now you've got another little negotiation. A good realtor is going to handle all that for you anyway. Third option, roll it into the loan. You say, Josh, I thought USDA would allow me to finance the closing cost and still pay zero down. They will. That's very true. However, there is a little trick to it. When you write a contract for $100,000 and then you send it to the appraiser gets a copy of the contract. The appraisers, what is a house worth? Well, it's worth what somebody's willing to pay for it. And so sometimes the appraiser will allow that contract price, which is what somebody's willing to pay for it, to influence their appraisal. And so a house that would appraise for $106,000 in this scenario, where you said, okay, we'll pay $100,000 for the house, but we want to bump the price once $6,000 to make it work. In this scenario, the appraiser looks at it, sees $106,000, and the appraisal comes in at 106.5. However, in this scenario, where you just assume you're going to be able to roll the closing costs into the price of the loan, the contract says $100,000, and you're gambling that the appraiser looks at this and goes, I know the contract's 106, but this house is worth 110. And then you're fine. But if they look at this house and say, it's worth 95, but there's an agreed on price of 100, I'm going to appraise it for 100, and it kind of works out, and he comps it or she comps it and it works, then this doesn't work because there's no room in the appraisal for the $6,000 in closing costs. Another option is a gift. This option is a gamble. It's a gamble. This option is a gift. So you say, hey, Grandpa, I need $6,000 for closing costs. He says, sure. Remember, it's got to be sourced in season, so he's got to have this in his real savings account, real checking account. He's going to have to give you a gift letter that says this is really a gift. He can't break your leg if you don't pay it back. You can't borrow this from the dude down at the pool hall that says for 12% I'll give you $6,000. This has to be a real gift. You can't really trick anybody on this one. It's got to be a gift. It's going to have to be a sourced and seasoned gift, real gift. Another option is a lender credit. This sometimes doesn't, this probably won't work for all of the closing costs, but it'll work for part of the closing costs and sometimes for all. What happens is the lender bumps your interest rate, and that buy down, that the opposite of a buy down fee, you use some of that fee to pay for your closing costs. In other words, the rate was 2.875, and you get the loan at 3.5, and there's a couple $1,000s, $2,000 or $3,000 in lender credit we can give you back towards your closing costs. So this is a good partial way to handle your down payment. Sometimes it works for all of it, but not usually. But it's a lender credit. There's an option. I'd love to say to you, Churchill Mortgage does that, nobody else does. That's not really true. Anybody would probably help you with a lender credit when it fits, when it's a good decision. And I'd love to talk to you about whether it's a good decision, whether it's a good fit for you. But there's a lender credit. Then another option is combo, like peanut butter and chocolate. Let's work it together. Maybe Grandpa says I can give you $2,500, but that's all I got. And you say okay, and I can get a lender credit of $2,500, and their covers $5,000 in closing costs, and you count the change in the sock drawer, and you figure it out, and you can cover all of your closing costs. You combo these things. Maybe the seller says, well, I'll give you $1,000 worth of closing costs. Whatever. You just start popping these dollars together to cover your closing costs. One more option is North Carolina Housing Down Payment Assistance Program. That's a program that'll give you an $8,000 second mortgage. That second mortgage has 0 payments and 0 interest for 10 years. Well, in 10 years, they pay it off. They give it to you as a gift. So if you keep this house, you stay in North Carolina for 10 years, you stay in this house for 10 years, your $8,000 is paid off. It does bump your interest rate, so it's not the best of these options. I mean, with all these options, you look for the one that's the best, the one that'll fit your scenario. And if the best one will work, good. And if it won't work, we move down to the second best. And if that won't work, we move down to the third best. And we keep working our way down till we find one that works, but there will be one that works for you. Somebody will have to walk you through all the choices. Great realtors will help you with that. And if there's anything I can do to help you with that, I'd love to help you too.